Okay, so next here in AUC section 230.14, we'll be discussing what happens when we learn new information after the date of the auditor's report, and with that new information we draw new conclusions and such. We remember from prior AUC sections that we are supposed to, before we issue the audit report, to obtain all of the sufficient audit evidence with which to base our opinion and our conclusions before we issue that audit report. But what happens if we learn of new information after the auditor's report that is relevant to our opinion and to the audit? So it says here that if, in rare circumstances, the auditor performs new or additional audit procedures or draws new conclusions after the date of the auditor's report, the auditor should document the circumstances encountered, the new or additional audit procedures performed, audit evidence obtained, and conclusions reached, and their effect on the auditor's report, and when and by whom the resulting changes to audit documentation were made and reviewed. So in general, we basically just treat this new information as any other piece of evidence obtained in our audit. We explain what we encountered, we explain the procedures we performed and the conclusions that we reached, and when and by whom the audit information was obtained and who in our firm reviewed it. So let's look in more detail about some examples of when we might find new information after the auditor's report that we might have to take these steps in consideration. And that's in section A23 in the explanatory material. So let's go down there. Okay, so now we're down in the explanatory material where we have some examples of matters that might arise after the date of the auditor's report. And this might happen when the auditor becomes aware of facts that existed at the date and which, if known at the date, might have caused the financial statements to be revised or the auditor to modify the opinion in the auditor's report. And also when the auditor concludes that procedures necessary at the time of the audit and the circumstances then existing were omitted from the audit of the financial information. And so when this stuff happens, we need to follow the audit documentation rules in accordance with QC section 10 in connection with our quality control procedures. So in summary, if we come across new information related to the audit that would have possibly had us revise the financial statements or the opinion of the auditor's report, like maybe we realized that we did possibly have a misstatement after we've already issued the auditor's report, then we should take all the steps that we just discussed in AUC section 230.14 to document the procedures we performed and the conclusions that we reached. And we also might find that we didn't do some of the procedures that we probably should have back whenever we were performing the audit. And so we should go back and document the procedures that we performed when we do perform them and the conclusions that we reached based on those procedures. So in general, we're supposed to perform all the necessary procedures to gain sufficient appropriate audit evidence before we issue the auditor's report. But of course, we're not perfect. And sometimes we may not know about some information that we learn later on. And so these requirements catch those types of situations and require that we still document our procedures and the conclusions that we found, even after we've issued the audit report.